Welcome back to Pick Cipher. This is a podcast where we invite leaders in the industry to come in here and talk about themselves, how they got there, the challenges they faced, how they overcome it. And we're still very much on series one, which is Coloring the Lead, promoting diversity in leadership in the UK. And I'm still your host. My name is Ayo. And with me in the studio is my co-host, Constance. Hello, Constance.
Hi, Aya. Hi. Hello everyone. It's good to be back in the studio, back to these conversations. I can't seem to get enough of them actually. We're really happy that you're here with us, and it's really a privilege for us. Thank you.
And again, she's let the cat out of the bag. So we have a very fantastic guest in the studio with us today. And her name is Kate, and she's a comms expert as well. And she's also an expert in neuro inclusion. I had to Google that. So I'm really excited because she's going to tell us all about it. So I'm going to hand over to yourself, Kate, to introduce yourself and tell us more about neuro inclusion.
Thank you so much, Ayo. Thank you, Constance, for that lovely introduction. My name's Kate Asiche, and I'm a global internal communications and also neuro inclusion navigator. For the last 25 years, I've been working in leadership spaces for global organizations, and latterly in the last year I've transitioned to focusing on neuro inclusion, which relates to neurodivergence, that is conditions like autism and ADHD, and helping organizations to navigate that space and to become more neuro inclusive by understanding and being aware of the various neurotypes.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Yes, that's very interesting. You know what, Kate? I'll be honest with you. Until we thought, oh, Kate CJ is coming to the studios, I never really, knew what neuro inclusion was about. I mean, I've heard should I use the word buzzword?
The buzzword.
I've heard it. I sort of think that I know about it. But when I heard your name, it was the first time I intentionally thought, okay, hang on, what is neuro inclusion? And I'm actually happy to say that because I didn't know before. Now I'm learning. I'm actually going to be learning something, in the studios today. And it's great. So why neuro inclusion? I know you probably started off as a comms expert. Now, why neuro inclusion?
Yeah, and thank you, Constance, for saying you don't know. I posted on this on LinkedIn yesterday that people so often are afraid to admit they don't know. There's an unwillingness in society nowadays, especially in professional settings, to say, I don't know. I know nothing. I don't understand. Please explain. Yeah. And what you've just said very coherently is that because you've said you don't know, you're willing to learn.
Yes,
and you're going to learn.
Absolutely.
If you say you know everything, then how on earth can you
learn?
Progress?
Yeah.
So why neuro inclusion? My children were diagnosed with neurodivergence, autism, and ADHD. One of them is both combined, which is AUDHD, 4 years ago. And since then, I've been on a journey to become an expert in neurodivergence. When they were diagnosed by CAMS, which is Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services, they're the only ones who can diagnose in the UK. They said to me, there's nothing we can do. We don't offer any therapy. Go and find out more and become an expert in neurodivergence, which is exactly what I've done. Okay. So it's both something I wanted to do because I had an interest in it anyway, but had it not been for the diagnosis, I would not have ended up where I am today.
So just looking at, because we're still struggling with diversity in the workplace in terms of BAME being represented. And then now we're talking about neuro inclusion. And I'm just looking at the combination of both because we come from a background and culture where if you show those signs to your parent, you probably have to go to church and have a deliverance. It's not about going to the hospital and getting the diagnoses and all of those things. And how often do employers recognize these? In fact, when you look at all of those declarations you need to make when you're applying for jobs, there was only one company I found that they put that as part of their questionnaire. I think that was Cisco or I've forgotten the company's name now. Yeah. So it's not a big thing yet. So when you mixed the dynamics of BAME and neuroinclusion, how can you shed more light on this? How does it affect people from our background?
It's a very good question and a deep one, and one that I've obviously been on from a personal perspective, a journey. I have to say, and I don't take any great pleasure in saying this, but in our Afro-Caribbean communities, the lack of knowledge about neurodivergence is more pronounced than it is in other communities. So often people will deny the presence of neurodivergence, or just say, which has happened to me many times, that you shouldn't listen to those people. They are trying to put your children into a box and to prevent them from accessing other opportunities that other children do. And you're human, so you naturally take those perspectives on board, even if you don't necessarily believe them. Yeah. In a workplace setting, there are protected characteristics around being Black, being female, being disabled, but neurodivergence is a so-called hidden disability. And there's no...
because it's not in the Equality Act, isn't it?
No,
yeah, it's not one of the
yet.
8. Is it 8 pillars now, or are there 9?
I don't know how many exactly there are, but you don't have to disclose. And obviously no one can tell. Unless you say it. And in fact, I think it's important to say that people don't always know. They may suspect. So my children were diagnosed, and they quite often this happens with parents. Their children's diagnosis holds up a mirror to themselves, and they start looking and thinking, hang on.
What have I done wrong?
Oh, no, not necessarily. Could that be me?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It's a reflection.
Could that be me?
Yes.
So he does this. Oh, I do that. Perhaps I am as well. So I've not been diagnosed, but I strongly believe that I am ADHD. And so, yes, it does create some nuances in the workplace that are just at the moment completely disregarded. So managers, HR, talent acquisition, recruiters don't necessarily consider neurodivergence at all.
Yeah. So what can neurodivergent people struggle with in the workplace? So what are the challenges that they might face in the workplace? Because even right now, I'm trying to rack my brains and I'm thinking, so what will be a disadvantage? What kind of discrimination or what kind of bias can they face in the workplace? Can you shed more light on that?
Sorry, I think that what I was actually going to ask first could be, are there possible signs to look out for? Because you just said something. Sometimes we don't even know. It takes a diagnosis of maybe a loved one, like you said, maybe a child, and then you're looking at that diagnosis and you're thinking, hang on, this could be me, So are there particular, and then I just asked the question for those that are neurodivergent in the workplace. First, as a talent manager, what signs am I possibly looking at? What signs am I possibly looking out for? How do I know, oh, hang on, this person might be neurodivergent, especially because they don't have to disclose. So, I want to think that sometimes people don't even know. So what would you say? How first is, what are the signs, maybe as a talent manager, what are the signs, or maybe even as a colleague, what are the signs I could possibly be looking out for to say, okay, hang on, has this person got different abilities to what I have?
Yeah, exactly. And it's different abilities, not less able, but different abilities. And thank you for saying that, because often I don't hear that. So autism and ADHD are a spectrum. Autism in particular is a spectrum. So there's no consistency really, to be honest with you. My children are both autistic, but one is over there and the other one is over there. They are like night and day. My son is more severe. So if you were to see him in the room now, you would know automatically. My daughter can hide it because women are often sort of encouraged to mask, even when they're very young. So girls quickly learn that they should be seen and not heard. whereas boys are quite often in society allowed to run wild, misbehave, jump up and down, and therefore people will notice and say, oh, he's doing a bit too much jumping, or he's doing a bit too much of this. What could be wrong? Whereas a girl will be sitting quietly in the corner. Who's going to know? She's fine. She's a bit quiet, but she's okay. So the signs are very different depending on the person. But one of the things that autistic people have been known to do is avoid eye contact. Okay. My children are the opposite. And this is why I say it's so hard to diagnose, because they, from day one, and this is why they were diagnosed late. My son 10, my daughter 14, because they were able to hold eye contact very well and in fact stare into your eyes, whereas many autistic people will do this and avoid anything like eye contact. They want no eye contact because they find it uncomfortable. But then again, many neurotypical people, and when I say neurotypical, I'm referring to people who are not neurodivergent, will also avoid eye contact. So you can't say 100% that that's, an autistic person, but it's one of the signs. Another sign is stimming. So I don't know if you've heard of stimming. Stimming is a physical activity, that autistic people, adults and children do. Children more, obviously, because they're uninhibited. They're not afraid to do things like that, whereas adults will control themselves. And this could be anything from finger flapping while they're talking. It's a calming mechanism, to something like this. And what this does is it filters, dilutes the light. So this harsh light that we have in this studio is very uncomfortable for many autistic people. And so to dilute the light, they will do this because it means that the light is not so harsh. It's filtering the light into their eyes. And I only learned that recently myself, so I'm also learning. But those are a couple of the indications that I can give you. But if you go out into the street and you see someone doing this, it could well be that they're just doing that.
Or
exactly.
just very well,
So talking about the sign, that's a sign that in the workplace, how can autism or ADHD affect someone's performance, affect their work? Because I've heard in previous organizations where somebody will say, I believe that person is on the spectrum.
Yes.
Because of what they're doing.
Yeah.
So how can they present as a challenge to people within the workplace?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So autistic people will often find the working environment very challenging because of the noise, because of the smell, because of the light, because of the wind that's coming from the air conditioning, printers, photocopiers, people, being around in quite significant numbers. Can all present challenges from a sensory overload perspective. So people who are neurotypical, who are not neurodivergent, will be able to filter out a lot of the noise and the stimulus around them. They've got mechanisms inside their body that enables them to switch off, or to cut off the noise from the photocopier and cut off the noise from the printer, to ignore the person over there who's talking too loud. Whereas an autistic person sees it all, hears it all, feels it all, smells it all, and it just overwhelms them. And so for them, taking lots of breaks is really paramount. Having a quiet space to work is paramount. Perhaps working different hours to others is paramount. Doing work which is deep, which they can focus on for a long period of time, is paramount. So often you'll find autistic people in engineering roles, IT roles, technical roles, in working with computers, not necessarily working with people, because it suits their style of living and being. Yeah, it's a different way of interacting with the world.
Yeah. So because this show is about leadership as well, because we do know how people treat people that are a bit different, and especially getting to the top. How do you see the prospect of neurodivergent people in getting to leadership position?
There's many neurodivergent people in leadership positions, many, more than you know. Quite often, a lot of them in technical companies will rise to the top because they are extremely knowledgeable, gifted, genius, very good with maths, engineering, electricals. And so they will rise naturally to the top. But they won't necessarily know they're neurodivergent. And people will just say, oh, he or she is quirky. We know they do this, we know they do that, and it's just tolerated as being part of the personality, which is one thing, but there's also neurodivergence behind it. So there are no barriers really per se, as long as you're high functioning. And that's a term we don't use very often now. We try not to because it's not politically correct anymore.
Oh, is it not?
To say so?
High
No.
functioning?
High functioning.
Oh,
Okay.
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 But because it denotes that every other autistic person is not.
Oh, okay.
Ah,
all right.
okay.
Yeah.
So now that we've pointed this out, neurodivergence in leadership, you've just said something. Sometimes people don't really know that they are neurodivergent, actually. But now I want to say Black, female, and neurodivergent. I know you did write about that. I am Black, female, and it can be a lot sometimes, especially when you rise to leadership roles. You feel like there's a lot that's expected of you. You feel some sort of pressure. Sometimes, with the last guest we were just talking, sometimes you could actually ask yourself, can I do this? And then it just takes that internal dialogue to actually tell yourself, yes, you can, and yes, you will. So that's the story of being Black female in leadership. Now, Black female and neurodivergent. How does that work? Within organizations, what would you say?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. There are lots of famous people who've now disclosed because it's considered to be okay now to say that you're neurodivergent. So Will.i.am is one that springs to mind. There's quite a few. I think, what's his name again? The rapper, very famous,
British.
married to Kanye West.
Kanye West.
Oh, okay.
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 You must have okay.
I think he's bipolar.
Yeah, okay.
Which is
Okay.
a slightly different thing. But yeah, it's more, accepted now to say that you have ADHD or you are autistic, less so autism. But yeah, I believe in creative spaces, there are many neurodivergent people because it lends itself to that line of work. In a corporate setting, it's harder. So there are many people with ADHD. I believe I'm one of them who's risen to a leadership position because it's I don't necessarily like saying this because I have a bugbear with it when people say, oh yeah, autism is my superpower. But in lots of ways, it has been my superpower to be ADHD because I'm able to get through a lot in more than a normal person would in one day. And by normal, I mean neurotypical. I shouldn't use the word normal. I can do about 5 tasks within a very short space of time because I will not necessarily do one thing. So I'll be going up the stairs to get my phone. And on the way up the stairs, I'll leave my phone bill halfway up the stairs. So I remember to pay it. So I'll sit down to pay it. Then I'll remember that my phone's upstairs. So I'll go upstairs to get my phone. Then on the way down, I'll see the carpet is dirty. And then I'll go and get the vacuum from downstairs, vacuum the carpet up to halfway, pick up my bill, pay the phone bill, go upstairs, put my phone down, get the vacuum, go back to... That's how my brain functions. So for a ADHD person, they call it a busy mind. That actually lends itself quite well to corporate setting. When people talk about me in a workplace, they will normally say she's a doer. She gets things done because my ADHD helps me to do that. But on the negative side, it also causes a lot of disorganization. I will forget very important things that I've got to do. I could very easily double book myself to do something crazy like climb Ben Nevis. And on the same day, book my car in for a service and forget that I'm climbing Ben Nevis. And when I tell that story, people laugh. How could you forget you're climbing Ben Nevis? Yes, that's a real story. That's a real story. But that's my everyday life. I will often do that. I'll forget that I'm climbing Ben Nevis.
Yeah. Okay. So how can organizations support neurodivergent people and even people with disability as well? What more can organizations do? Because a lot of people will say, oh, we have a disabled toilet, we have a ramp,
Yeah.
We probably have a quiet room. We have
A sensory room.
a sensory room.
Yeah.
What? Yeah, not many, but the little that I've done. But so, what more can organizations do to support people with neurodivergent, people who are neurodivergent, and people who've got disability as well?
They need to have conversations, honest conversations, open and transparent conversations with leadership, with people managers, with HR, with anyone who's involved in engaging colleagues about neurodivergence, and make it an open conversation and a transparent one that people are not afraid to have. So it's about creating a culture, curating, as I call it, a culture of neuro inclusion, which is very different to what you're saying. What you're saying about sensory room, disabled toilet, ramp, they're tick box exercises in order to meet the legislation. But there's no legislation for neurodivergent people at the moment because no one understands enough about it in order to interpret
Probably
that
because
from a
a lot of
legal.
grey areas.
Yeah, lots
Yeah.
of grey areas,
Yeah.
and that's why I extol the virtues of training, and it's something that I offer, and I've started to offer as part of my services. Training, coaching, one-to-one discussions with leadership about what neurodivergence looks like, how it plays out in the workplace, and how you can, make it more comfortable and increase engagement and productivity by allowing neurodivergence to thrive in the workplace.
Okay, so do you think you've had any challenges, as regards being neurodivergent, even though you're not so sure? How do you think you actually would say, okay, for those that might be facing issues like this, that, this is what you might you can do? How do you think you managed it if you had any challenges as regards this?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I've obviously had challenges being a Black female, that intersectionality, that misogynoir, as they call it, the hatred of Black women in particular is quite pronounced in the Western world. And how it's impacted me, yes, I have definitely in workplace settings been unwilling or less likely to get involved in social activities. That's one thing that I struggled with up until the last few years, probably, where as I got older, I became more relaxed. But when I was younger, I hated it. I used to love being on my own, and that's very much a feature of neurodivergence, autism in particular, although I don't believe I'm autistic. Um, the ability to sustain oneself by being on one's own is quite a feature
So,
of autism.
how did you change from being comfortable within your own self now to wanting to go to social circles? Is it that
Or
your
engaging,
role or engaging, is it that your role demanded that and you needed to change, or something else changed you?
Yeah, so you get older, entrepreneurial spirit kicks in. You need to go out and spread the word about your business. As a sole trader, you can't sit in your house on your own or just talk online. You've got to go out and meet people, meet and greet, host events, do panels, chair panels. I've done all that in the last few years, and that's through necessity, but also I've learned to just accept that it's part and parcel of being an entrepreneur. But do I still prefer my own company? Yes, for sure. At the end of the day, having been to a conference or having had a discussion or been on a panel or chaired some kind of workshop, I'm always exhausted and ready to recharge. It's a really important thing to say about neurodivergence. It's something I didn't realize, but my daughter, she actually is physically drained when she's had a social interaction. So often in church, we'll go to church on a Sunday and people will come over because they know us and they'll ask a question, how are you? And how's college? And blah, blah, blah. And then as soon as we get home, she'll go to her room, shut her door, headphones on. You will not see her for at least 3 hours. So there's a recovery that's required. And that's really pivotal for organizations to understand the recovery that's required after a meeting or a conference or a workshop that a neurotypical person may not need.
Yes. So basically just saying, we recognize this person to be neurodivergent. After this meeting, everybody give them space.
Give her space.
Let them do them.
It's so interesting. Myself and I chaired a panel on neurodivergence at a communications conference a few months ago. And the whole panel was neurodivergent. I was the only one who was not diagnosed, but I believe I am. And after the panel, it was about an hour of talking to each other and talking to the audience and asking questions. We all came out of the room and just said, can we just stop talking?
That's a lot.
We need to go to the toilet. And we all went to the toilet and just sat down in the loo, all of us, for about 20 minutes. Went and had a tea or coffee on our own. It was quite interesting, and none of us wanted to interact. Whereas you'll see a neurotypical person will come out of that kind of conference buzzing, wanting more conversation.
Yes.
Come on, let's go and get dinner. Let's have a glass. Let's go to the pub and have more. Whereas neurodivergent people will typically say, no, I need to recover.
Okay.
For our audience, I know some people might be thinking and saying, "Oh, is that why my husband spends a lot of time in the toilet?" They're not neurodivergent, because that topic has been going on social media.